Hello there. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome back. Again, I am Deidre Martinez, CEO of the Sheboygan County Chamber of Commerce, and we have the pleasure of talking with our candidates from Assembly District 26 here. So first I want to say thank you to incumbent Amy Binsfeld for joining us today. Really appreciate we've been able to spend some time together, so you're familiar with what this looks like. And Joe Sheehan, this is your first time doing this with me, so thank you for participating and giving of your time, and both of you for your willingness to serve. It's not an easy job, and none of us want it, so thank you. Truly. I also want to say just a quick thank you to Prevea Health for their sponsorship of our Governmental Affairs and Advocacy Committee and the programming that we are able to do here at the Sheboygan County Chamber of Commerce. Without their continued support, we wouldn't have as many wonderful programs. So just to give you a quick little rundown, we are going to give each candidate an opportunity to introduce themselves. We will then begin asking questions. I will do my best to go back and forth and make it as fair as possible. Each candidate will have 2 minutes initially to answer the question. Then we will go on to the next. We do have a timekeeper here, so they will be paying attention and making sure that they stay within their 2-minute time frame. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. So Amy, if I could have you maybe do your introduction and let us know why you are choosing to come back and do this all over again.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you to the Chamber for hosting. I always appreciate Deidre and all of her willingness to serve in our community. I am Amy Binsfeld. I have been serving currently in the 27th District for the past session. Truly a gift to be able to do that. Overall, I have been born and raised in the Sheboygan area, initially from Howards Grove. I spent 24 years of my career in the heart of Sheboygan in retail. So the business community is kind of my background and my love. I also have a paralegal degree and served locally for a law firm as well for a few years, so I enjoy that aspect of the world as well. And it just kind of seemed like a normal transition to go into politics. You know, who doesn't want to do that after business and some law? Overall, I think I felt a calling to the community that, again, I've served my entire life privately or in the private sector. And I truly enjoy raising my family here as I was raised here. So my husband and I have been married for over 22 years. We have 2 children together. Again, I want to make sure that Sheboygan remains the same community that I grew up in for my kids going forward. And I hope, not too soon, but I do hope that my grandkids will also be raised here. So I want to make sure that Sheboygan stays the great community that it is. And that's why I have chosen to put my name back on the ballot and try and fight to stay in the State Assembly.
Thank you. And Mr. Joe Sheehan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. First of all, again, thank you for this commitment. That's an important piece that you all get to listen to the candidates to make an informed choice. I've been in Sheboygan 35 years, going to 4 stop signs. I do this now. I've taught the different steps of what it means to be a Sheboyganite. Most of you probably know me as the superintendent of Sheboygan Area School District. I was there for 20 years, which is quite a long time. And the whole point of that was preparing all our children to be successful. Upon that, leaving that, Sheboygan County Economic Development, I was there for 2 years, and their sole purpose is to have local businesses flourish. Well, again, as executive director, my whole piece was people working together, and that's what we did. A little bit about my history. I come from a family of 7 kids. And with 7 kids, there's some things my parents taught me, and I still to this day use them. One has to do with cooperation. One has to do that you need to give and take. Another one has to do with listening. And last one, setting priorities. I've used those 4 pieces to guide my personal and private and also public life for quite a few years. Again, it's the whole piece of how do we then set our priorities and then move forward on those. As far as the next steps in here, I tried to retire, tried a couple times actually, and I just have the energy to do what? To make a difference. Energy is not energy, that's a waste. Energy, when you inspire someone to take action, that's what I've been doing and will do as we get elected. So thank you again for having this dialogue. I think we both look forward to it. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you both. Okay, Joe, I will start the first question with you. So, given the rapid changes in technology in the labor market, what specific strategies would you propose to enhance workforce training programs in Wisconsin? And how would you ensure these programs meet the evolving needs of employers and employees?
Boy, that's a tough one because it's not going away. I mean, it's been here for a few years and it's going to continue. So how do we get our businesses the people that they need? Well, there's lots of different ways of doing it. Again, you're going to hear from me again and again and again, education. That's my bread and butter, and it's what I believe leads to a successful future. So with the workforce, it's hard because trying to figure out how we're going to move forward and at the same time keep in the past some things that we probably should not have done. What we've done with Red Raider Manufacturing, I don't know if you've heard of that. It's a program that we have in the Sheboygan Area School District that what it does is businesses came to us and said, we need help, we need skilled labor. Saying, okay, what are you talking about? What do you need? Well, they came up with the lists of what we need, which is fantastic. Then we brought in staff, we brought in parents, we brought in the people that actually did the work online. And when they came in, they talked. Well, now we have a Red Raider at North and at South, and those kids are graduating with huge jobs. They're graduating with jobs that pay $20, $30 an hour, and more importantly, they love it. You know, we're graduating people who are welding certified, who are CNC operators. We have, Paul, you're here. LTC is an incredible program that we don't wait till our kids graduate. That's a part of the issue. How do we get our kids prepared? Well, that's one piece. Another one, the SCDC, they're getting a grant for advanced training. The whole piece of how are we going to do this, you got to start with the people who are here and then move forward. But boy, it's going to take time, but we will do it by getting the right people at the table.
Thank you. Amy, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay.
Overall, I guess when I look at the technology that's coming into our business world, we can see, and Joe kind of hit on it, the fact that we have to utilize particularly technical education. And whether that technical education is brought in through the apprenticeships in our high schools, which are being very well pushed, I would say at this point. I know that Joe and Mike Trimberger had worked years ago to kind of create that program, and a very good program that I continue to talk to Mike about today. Those are the ways to reach out to our high school students. By getting them involved in those apprenticeship programs leads them to a course of life when they're maybe not prone to go into those four-year colleges. So I'm a huge proponent when it comes to youth apprenticeship programs. It's one way, again, to help them find success and not feel that if they're not following their peer to that four-year college, but rather get that education through the high school level and maybe take it to that technical college level, again, is a huge advantage to our communities. I know specifically as well that our businesses work directly with LTC to make sure that they are in the right programs. You can look at the LTC programs locally here and see that some will shift in and out based on the need of the community, and that is a hat tip, again, to the technical schools response. So it's important from a state level that anything we do continues to help that thrive, and through that we can make sure that our young students are thriving and going out into their careers in the manufacturing world and through the technology aspects.
Thank you. And Amy, we'll start with you. With small businesses being a vital part of Wisconsin's economy, what concrete policies would you implement to support their growth, particularly in underserved communities, and how would you measure the success of these policies?
I think overall, as someone that came from a 24-year background in a small business, you know that the best thing you can do is find the key employees to work with you. As a state government, sometimes the best thing we can do is get out of the way. When people thrive the most when they can use their own success, when they can push themselves, when they feel driven to do it. There are things that the state can get involved in. There are other things that it is imperative, I feel, they need to stay out of, and some of that has to do with making sure that there's not over-regulation. Particularly when these small businesses want to get started, don't inhibit that entrepreneur from wanting to do it. If you put too much burden on them, how can they do it? So overall, I think it's really just a matter of encouraging instead of discouraging by overregulation on the state level, and hopefully we will see those communities thrive and those young or sole proprietors actually be able to take off and make something in their small communities.
Thank you. Joe, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I got it. Thank you. Again, small businesses, they thrive. You drive up and down Michigan and other streets in Sheboygan, what do you see? Buildings. You see, businesses are popping up. Well, they're popping up. One, we are somehow, and we're doing it correctly on that, people are coming, creative people are coming to Sheboygan. Creative people are already here are beginning to say, you know, I can do that with some low percentage as far as debt. And what they can get money-wise, they can get loans and make it happen. Again, if you look, the amazing amount of small businesses that are thriving here, it's an incredible piece. Now, again, and made a good point, government needs to help and not get in the way. You don't want, okay, here's all the red tape, sorry, I couldn't open up or I couldn't stay open. And that's where the state can come involved. And again, with giving short loans and low rate loans, those pieces again would help the people start and again keep businesses together and separate from government. That's how they strive.
Thank you. And Joe, we'll start with you. Healthcare is also a major component to workforce development, and Wisconsin has been one of the last states to expand Medicaid under the ACA. Do you support expanding healthcare opportunities, and why or why not?
Most definitely. And again, I'm a rookie, so I'm going to be asking rookie questions in a positive way. I do not understand why you have over 90,000 people that could be getting medical support and aren't. I mean, people need to explain that to me. And I think that'd be one of the first things we do is revisit that. So again, you have more medical coverage than you do now. And the strength of that, it would not be at the expense of the taxpayers. That money is allocated from the federal government. Let's use that appropriately.
Amy?
I think when I look at healthcare overall, it is important to remember that when you're dealing with things like Medicare and Medicaid, the amount of money that the reimbursement comes at, and I look at it and go, how do we really look at our community and get them to be thriving to a point where they themselves find a successful opportunity, a successful career, and are on their own healthcare plan? The goal for me is not to expand people onto the system, but rather help them understand how to work their way up, feel good about themselves, and end up supporting themselves and having that healthcare coverage without the state having to provide it. Now, when we deal with Medicare, which was originally designed to help those in the more elderly bracket, as well as our youth that may be physically or mentally struggling, the reimbursement rate is always lower than it is when an able-bodied adult ends up on the system. To me, that's a little bit backwards. Why are we allowing somebody a higher reimbursement rate that could actually be out in the workforce working than we're actually giving to those that need the rate? So I think it's important to remember there are those that we need to make sure are covered in those Medicare areas. But it's important that anybody who is able-bodied and able to work, that we are encouraging them to do that and find their own way up rather than expanding the government health care plan. Again, use where needed, don't overuse, and try and put more people on it, but try and help more people find their way into their own individual success.
Thank you. And Amy, I will start with you. A study recently done by the city of Sheboygan showed a need for several thousand more homes. And as we know, housing shortages are also make a significant impact negatively on workforce development, attraction, and retention. The median household income in Sheboygan County was $65,000 between 2017 and 2021. What measures would you take to address the affordable housing shortage, and how would you work with local municipalities to ensure they have the resources that they need to be successful?
And again, this is not just, you mentioned it's a study here in Sheboygan. This is going to be statewide. This is definitely a nationwide issue, really, if you want to put it all the way out there. Overall, when I look at Sheboygan, we have been very lucky to have a lot of corporate headquarters stationed in our own county. We have huge business opportunities here, and for those that don't know, we have partners in business that have gotten together and purchased certain areas of land where affordable housing is being built throughout the county. So again, Sheboygan is extremely unique, and exactly one of the reasons I'm so proud to be a part of this community is because we have that business thought process to work together to make that happen. Overall, I do know, and I recently saw something which kind of shocked me, that we just had a huge development kind of central to south in the city of apartments, and I did see that 70% of them are rented. And I know that we have just finished a couple more complexes that have not even filled up yet. So I'm a little bit, although we need the housing, we have to be careful too on exactly, are we getting it rented? Because when I'm hearing that 30% of one that has been built for probably at least 4 years is still available, it's making me wonder exactly the approaches that we're taking. So at a state level, we also this past session did work with kind of build back our communities. So we did put in some 0% interest loans to try and use some of the downtown areas that have apartments up above, or some of the box stores that are now dark, as they call it, to see if those could be developed into housing projects for the community. So that is something in the past session, and going forward, I would guess we will continue to work on utilizing some of the buildings that are already there to see if we can also make that work for the communities for housing.
Thank you, Amy. Joe?
Well, when it comes to, again, Sheboygan is very good at looking at the bigger picture. So this part of apartments and that they're affordable are a part of the workforce development piece. Our local businesses, and you were right, Amy, we got amazing people that are here. I mean, companies that are here. They don't have to go to Detroit or Minneapolis to here. They are here and they make decisions here. Some of those decisions have to do with housing. Sheboygan County Economic Development is working with several companies, and they're actually building suburbs. For what purpose? To have people come and move here. That's the mindset that we need. That's the mindset that will help us deal with the workforce. Again, the workforce development, there's reasons why it occurs. Housing is a huge piece. And the hard part, for talking to some of the realtor people, is it's the dollar amount. The dollar amount of, quote, starter homes. That's the difficult piece. And you can't say, okay, congratulations, you have a job and your house costs $300,000. That just doesn't work. So what do we do? Well, again, that's what makes Sheboygan so special. The realtors are sitting down saying, we realize that. We need to do, by the way, it's called early entry housing, meaning it's not low income, but it's affordable. So how do we do that? Again, we have our companies on board saying, you're right, we need to help them help us. So what will happen is you're going to see more and more apartments and condos. I mean, they estimate that we need them for years to come. Well, we got to do it so it's affordable. That's the hardest piece. But again, that's where the state government can get involved. So very clearly, workforce development, housing is a significant piece of that. And we're on it, better than most communities, but we're not there. And we need to get there if we truly want people to be moving here and being employees.
Thank you. Joe, we'll start with you. The state of Wisconsin currently has about a $4.6 billion surplus and growing. How would you suggest those funds be used, and when would you suggest we start using them?
What time is it? But very seriously, that's a huge amount of money. But also, and again, as an educator, some of that money came from educators, meaning that they were not given, as they had been in the past, the state financial support. So when that occurred, sorry, I'm missing that part. Wow, can you repeat the question? Yeah, I'm not nervous.
$4.6 billion surplus. How would you suggest
we
use the funds and when?
A chunk of it would go back to education, but another chunk actually is not. There's other things that can be done. They're talking about infrastructure, they're talking about roads, they're talking about giving money back to the taxpayer. I mean, those are all pieces that are going to be a part of the bigger puzzle. But the biggest part where I'm concerned is education, public education, and making sure that people are getting the wage they need to stay. The last thing we want is quality people going off and taking other jobs, because quite frankly, education just doesn't pay what it needs. Teachers aren't doing it, for the big paycheck, but they also have to make ends meet, and we need to use some of that funds for it. And part of the funds of it, too, would also be, it's not a one-time shot. And I think we'll hopefully get into this later. What do we do for education in that model, that what we can do to get people to get the money that they need to stay in education? So, thank you.
Amy.
When I look at a surplus, I always think, well, surplus is better than a deficit. I think everybody would agree with that when they're thinking about their own home budget. Of course, right now, based on the economy that we have, we just talked about affordable housing. When we think about those people sitting at home trying to figure out their personal budgets, many are struggling based on inflation. So for me, from a state level, a couple of the things we worked on this past session was trying to help those people combat the inflation rate by allowing them to keep more money in their pockets. And one of the ways we did that was we did try to provide a tax cut to those families making $28,000 to $150,000. Vast majority of Wisconsin right there, $28,000 to $150,000, and our governor vetoed it. He did not feel that they deserved that money back to help with the inflation. We also tried to pass that seniors would have a tax cut when it came to their income, also vetoed by the governor. So these are two ways that as people are trying to make their own budgets meet at home, it's hard for me to sit in Madison and say, I know how to spend your money better than you do, as you're sitting there at home trying to figure out how to make ends meet. And now I'm supposed to spend it instead of allowing you to spend it. So for me, it's more about trying to give the people back the extra that we have taken. If there is projects that maybe we could look at as a state that benefit just about everybody, I would say infrastructure in our roads is a great way to utilize that. Look at some big one-time projects if we need to invest that way to make sure that we're not putting the burden back on the taxpayer with a rolling need for that money, but rather utilize one-time projects with anything that we're not going to provide back to the taxpayers.
Thank you. We will transition a little bit into education. Ask and you shall receive. We'll start with you, Amy. What is your stance on school choice programs, and how do you propose to balance these options with the needs to strengthen and support traditional public schools?
Overall, I am a huge proponent of school choice. And the reason is, as a mother, I have two children that were raised in the same home, same parents, not cookie cutters at all when it comes to learning. As I sat in Madison, I can think of one hearing where a woman came in and shared with us that she had 3 different children, 3 different routes in which she took them. She started everyone in a public. One went off eventually to a charter and one to a private, and one successfully went through public. But she was a perfect example of why those choices are needed. And oftentimes we'll hear the term, well, we're creating 2 systems. The bottom line is we already have 2 systems. It's called your economic status. Because for some people, they can move to a different district because they can afford a house in that district. Therefore, their children can thrive in a different school. But for those that can't afford that move, they can get stuck in a district they don't want to be in if there is no choice for them. So I want to make sure that we have an opportunity for all of our kids and all of our families to make sure that those kids thrive. We do need to remain focused on funding schools, but again, my focus is funding the child and the family, not just a building. So we need to make sure if we want those kids to thrive that we are giving those options and continuing to move them forward in a positive path rather than locking them into a community that isn't working for them or a school that's not working for them.
Thank you. Joe?
Is this including vouchers as part of it?
Yes, vouchers, charter schools.
So it's not going to be a further question on vouchers?
No, well,
Okay.
I mean, there's lots of questions,
Yeah,
but
right.
I won't ask it if you answer it before I get there. How about that?
Got it.
Okay.
Got it. Well, your school choice, I mean, students need that. Different kids need different ways to learn. There's no doubt about that. I mean, Sheboygan Area School District, I don't know if you're aware, we have 5 charter schools. The charter schools they got together with staff, they got together with parents and kids and said, what do you want? They said, we want more of this is an example of a project-based school. Okay, see if enough people want to do that, and if it does, guess what? It happened. Sheboygan Area School District is a great example of having options for kids. As far as vouchers, hope you know that vouchers, the Sheboygan Area Schools District had to send $6 million plus back to the state to pay for vouchers. That is wrong. They paid for vouchers. Remember, vouchers are private schools. They do not have to accept every student. As far as a due process that they have their own separate piece. And as far as them and when they are, what they're accountable for, the testing is a piece. Those are things that, should there be competition? Absolutely. Should it be that kids have choices of where they go? Absolutely. But it shouldn't be two separate systems. When it comes to, again, the voucher system, the dollar amount, if you really want to look down the road, that's what scares me. If vouchers continue and they get to, again, take the kids that they want, others are going to say, oh, really? Well, of course that's a voucher. Well, look at the kids that they don't take. Guess what? Those kids are our kids, and those kids need to be supported. So the whole voucher piece needs to be reviewed. People go, oh, so you don't like choice. Choice is a critical piece, and we challenge public education. Okay, you want the funding, then make it happen, and then hold them accountable for that. I believe they can do that. Obviously, with my background, I totally believe, given the right steps and the right dollar amounts, they will effectively give students a choice.
Thank you. Did you want to?
I did want to just, and one of the reasons I talk about the two systems are already in place. Again, if I look here at Sheboygan Area School District, if you check their DPI report card, you will see they're at a 61.5 out of 100. If you go down south of us to Whitefish Bay, they're at 95 out of 100. So when people think it doesn't matter where you live, it does. And if people say, well, Whitefish Bay is kind of far away, well, let's take a look at Kohler's rating. Kohler has a 37.8% open enrollment. There's a reason for that, but they're also sitting at 89 points out of 100. So that's why choice is needed for our students to make sure they thrive.
Can I counter
30
back?
seconds.
And I appreciate what she's saying. But the bottom line, when you don't have to accept kids, and some kids, quite frankly, take more work. They need more help, and that is a public education system. It's everybody's. So if you want to have vouchers, go ahead, but you got to take every kid then, and then let's compare.
And this is a follow-up question. We'll start with Joe. How would you ensure accountability and transparency in the allocation of public education funds? And what measures would you implement to track the effectiveness of spending in improving educational outcomes?
Traditionally, you have the tests to see how they're doing. That's one piece, but quite frankly, it's just one small piece. Other pieces have to do with, okay, what's your graduation rate? Another one has to do with what are the kids doing, and that takes a follow-up 1 or 2 year survey down the road. How are you doing? Were you prepared? Did we do a good job preparing you for whatever steps that you decided to take? Could be a plumber, could be an electrician, could be an auto mechanic, could be a biology teacher. Whatever they are, were you prepared well? And that's the piece that, how do you evaluate that? Again, what I just said on the survey piece is down the road. Because it is important. I'm not saying, oh, just give public education money and they'll take care of it. We don't have to hold them accountable. Yeah, we do, because it's our kids. But the educators I know say, bring it on. Give me the support, and you can evaluate me any way you want. But my kids are going to be growing. And that's a real important piece.
Thank you. Amy.
I think when I look at the accountability piece of it, I also recently looked at a study which showed administration versus the growth of administration in our public schools versus the growth of teachers, salaries is what we're talking about, and then how many students are coming in. For those that aren't aware, we're continuing to see a decline in students, which is simply because people are not having as big of families. So enrollment at schools in general has gone down, not drastically, but it's on a downward trend. In fact, if you look at the spike in the birth rate was in 2007. So if you do the math, those kids are now 17 or 18 years old, depending on their birth time. So we are continuing for the past 18 years, roughly, to see a decrease in children being born. When I'm looking at this chart and I see administrative costs in our public school system skyrocketing over what the teachers are making, it's concerning to me. Joe hit the nail on the head. We do need to support our teachers. What I would like to do in Madison is secure that if we're going to give more funding to our schools, that we are making sure the funding is going to the right place. that place does belong, in my opinion, with the teachers who are guiding those students in every classroom and making sure that the education is there for the student. Again, those two are way down at the bottom of the graph in comparison to administration. Oftentimes we find that when you look at the increase in the school staff, it's the administration that continues to go up, not the teachers, not the support staff, but the actual administration, which are the larger salaries. So I would like to see a little bit more accountability in our schools to make sure that the money is getting where it needs to be for the good of our students going forward.
Thank you. And given the, and I'll start with you, Amy, I apologize. Given the importance of early education in long-term academic success, what policies would you support to expand access to high-quality early education, especially for marginalized communities?
Are you talking more of a 4-year-old kindergarten program?
Like pre-Ks and
Okay.
yes.
So again, I think, there's conflicting information on this. I will find some studies that have shown trying to get our kids into early education at 4 years old is not necessarily the best thing for our kids. Now, again, define the education. A lot of kids can get educated through play. They can have active, interactive, and educational play at the age of 4. They don't necessarily need structured school. There is nothing wrong with structured school if that's what the parent finds to be the best for them. But I am not seeing direct surveys that are saying a child that had this is over another child as far as their growth in education. So oftentimes when we look at reading scores, for example, we're looking at those for 3rd and 4th grade. Kids will catch up at different times. Some may start a little bit sooner, but by that 3rd or 4th grade, they're leveling off. So I'm not opposed to supporting that, but I don't see that that is a be-all, end-all. If we start 4K, we're just going to have students that are excelling over other areas. So I think it remains a choice for the families to decide how they want to pursue that education for their children, or if they want more of a child care setting for them.
Thank you. Joe?
This is another example of how everything's connected to workforce development and to get people that our employers need. If you've heard of Million Dreams, they're here in Sheboygan right now. What they are is child care, that 2nd and 3rd shift. That is revolutionary. They are developing a program where parents, again, have the shifts where they can work a 2nd shift and still have their kids taken care of. Important parts of what they're dealing with, too, is, and Angel's the lady who's running this, and they have the data to show if you have certain activities in that when we're talking about 2, 3, and 4 years old, that it does make a difference. They do develop quickly and they do develop well. The problem with child care is if you charge people enough for the people working have a livelihood, the people can't afford it. On the other side of it, okay, if you keep the price so low that the people can afford it, you don't have staff. That hole needs to be filled. And that's where I believe state government can be involved in helping them, because it's not just the state government, it's also our employers. Our employers want their people to be working and not worry about, oh, where's my kid now because of child care issues. Obviously, it's going to help the parent. It's going to help, again, what I just talked about with the businesses, because people know their kids safe and they can focus on what they need to at work. And also, and again, statistics do show the numbers that it makes a difference. It makes a difference as they develop. It's not just, and Angel made it real clear to tell me, Joe, it's not daycare. Daycare is not what we do. We do young education, and we'll give you the data that shows that makes a difference. Again, it's all connected with how we're working with our businesses and our families to make it work, but it has to work. Child care has to be addressed. And in some states, what they're doing, they're turning it as part of the benefit package. You know, they have insurance, they have dental, and they also have child care. Stop.
Thank you, Joe.
I'd just like to mention, if we're going to kind of veer off into the child care aspect of that question, we did at a state level address some of those areas this past session where we were trying to address particularly some of the regulations that have inhibited these early centers from being able to service the communities. So again, we talk about overregulation of a small business. This is one of those areas we want to make sure to keep our kids safe. but we want to make sure that we're not overburdening. The bills that we passed, more or less, are not some that would be required, but they would allow some leniency for those facilities to take kids and deal with it a little bit differently than has been.
Thank you. And I think I started with Amy last time. See, now you guys are confusing
I
me
know.
and throwing me off. Joe, we'll start with you. In light of the growing mental health concerns among students, what comprehensive strategies would you propose to integrate mental health services into Wisconsin schools? And how would you plan to ensure these services are accessible to all students?
And that one, I'll be the first. It's a great issue that needs to be dealt with. And I quite frankly don't have the background to make that decision or what. That's another part of where I'm coming from is people, legislators, should not be the ones making decisions until they've sat down with experts and sat down with the people that are impacted by it. That's a perfect example. What do we need to support so our kids have the mental health support that they need? The good thing that's happened so far is we're admitting it now. This isn't new, but it's new that we're admitting it. Ooh, it's an issue and we got to deal with it. And that's where, again, being at the legislative would focus and say, okay, bring in these people, get to the table, and we'll talk about it to develop a very comprehensive plan to make it work.
Thank you. Amy?
I'm very glad to say I was at that table in the past session. So we did actually work with school districts this past session. Some different players that came to the table to discuss what to do for the mental health of our students. And in the past budget, we did allot some money for the schools to try and have, in some places it's called a PATH program, where counselors and different mental health professionals would come directly into the schools. They could have an area in which to sit with the students, counsel them as needed, make a follow-up appointment. So we are trying to make it easier, knowing that sometimes when these kids go home, their parents are not going to get them that care that they need. So that is something that was addressed this past session. And we're continuing to, I would assume that will continue to grow in the next session, but I was happy that that was a part of our budget and everything in the past session that we did just finish.
Perfect. Thank you. Did you want to add it? Nope. Okay. We are going to transition to the next topic. This one gets a little racier, so buckle your seatbelts. These are probably the questions that you all really sent in and wanted to be answered. First, what is your position on an equal rights amendment to the Wisconsin Constitution, and why do you support your position? And I think we started with you last, so we'll... Or did I do the, well, let's just start with Joe because I already said it, so,
Yeah.
sorry.
On the equal rights.
The Equal Rights Amendment to the Wisconsin Constitution. Do you support, or what is your position on amending the Wisconsin Constitution for equal rights?
Oh, it's amending, is it truly amending, is my question. Is it setting things up for, okay, what's coming next? So, and that's very short. And as my dad always said, you know, just don't talk on and on just because. So you made your point, which I think I just did. I stopped.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Amy?
I guess I really define equal rights. Like, what are we trying to?
Well, I think it goes into a lot of different spaces, but we can specifically talk more about abortion. Maybe that'll help to guide the conversation. So, you know, some of the things surrounding the Equal Rights Amendment have to do with protections for reproductive freedoms, LGBTQ+, you know, so on and so forth. So one of the questions specifically for you, Representative Binsfeld, is as a woman, how can you oppose reproductive freedom? How could you vote for an abortion ban with no exceptions specifically?
So I actually did not. If you check my record, you will find that I actually, in March of 2023, co-sponsored a bill for rape, incest, and the life of the mother exceptions. You will also find in June, I believe, of 2023, I voted in favor of expanding birth control options for women. I have never once spoken out against IVF. In fact, I would be more than happy to take that on and make sure that we secure IVF going forward for women. And finally, I did vote for a referendum to come to the people, because I personally feel that with the state being in control, it is not up to myself and other legislators. It It is up to the people. So if we truly want to know what the people think, the referendum should go to the people. And I know there's a lot of misinformation out there. I will clarify where one piece came from. There was an amendment that was added on to our state budget, and it had to do, so remember the state budget has to do with all the fiscal policy, and it was brought as an amendment to discuss abortion during the fiscal policy. At that time, the bill was then deemed not germane, or the amendment, was deemed not germane to the bill. It was voted down by the speaker in the chamber, at which time we then had to take a vote after it was appealed, and that is the vote they are talking about. I simply said that the amendment was not germane to the topic. But I have supported exceptions for rape, incest in the life of the mother. I have also, again, tried to expand birth control options for women.
Thank you. So I'll position that a little different to you, Joe.
Yeah.
Do you support abortion, and at what point, how many weeks, how many months, where do you think that should stop, if at all?
Right. Women's reproductive rights. You hear that word rights. It's not something that should be taken away. I'm very clear, and I think that the courts got it wrong. The Supreme Court got it wrong. We're back now to 1849. I'm sorry, that is not where we should be. I'm glad I'm hearing some comments regarding, say, for rape and incest. But so you're going to have people vote on how a woman and her doctor, woman and significant others in her family are going to operate? That is not the government's business. A woman wants the most private and personal decisions to be made, and to say, okay, we'll let you know at the state level that what's acceptable and what isn't. That is just not who I am. That's not who we should be with our women. It's very clear that it's their choice. It's not, and you talk about the weeks. Again, there you go, the week says who? How dare I tell a woman what days or weeks that she has to make a decision? It's between her and her doctor and whoever else is near and dear in her family. Very strong about that, and always have been. So no one's going to worry about, oh, what did Joe really mean by that? I hope I'm being very clear today that that is a choice with the woman, not government.
Thank you. Yes. Sure.
So first off, for those in the room that are not aware, the law right now in Wisconsin, based on a Dane County judge decision on December 5th of 2023, here in Wisconsin, a woman can have an abortion up to 20 weeks. We are basically Roe v. Wade in Wisconsin right now. So a lot of, again, misinformation is being spread around the state, but right now we are at 20 weeks. So I guess if Joe is saying he wants it to go to 40, at some point people have to understand, I know life of the mother comes up a lot. You have to wonder at what point, if the mother's at 30 weeks, can't we try and save them both? Why would the mother have to take the baby's life? So again, it needs to go to the people.
Man, you
30
just mentioned
seconds.
the 40, I don't know where that came from. But the other piece, you're saying that what was not accurate. I'm just saying, people, if you're interested, look at the voting. Look how things where people were voted.
I'd agree.
Thank you. And I will start with you, Amy. Do you believe that restrictions on abortion access and women's health care access impact women's participation in the workforce? And if so, what measures would you advocate for to safeguard both reproductive and women's economic opportunities and rights?
Again, I've mentioned that I did vote in favor of expansion of birth control. I think if we can be more proactive, providing women that control over their own lives, again, we can't control everything people do, but if you're making it accessible to them and readily accessible to them, which was the point of the bill that I voted for, I guess things are going to happen, but I think sometimes we're looking for problems rather than looking for the solutions. And what I would like to do is look for the solution. If we can be more proactive with women and their care, then we don't have to be as reactive, and they can continue on their college path or their economic and career path because they've taken that control in their own life early.
Thank you.
I think that's something we agree upon.
Okay.
So, well, when it comes to that piece, we need to have much better education at a younger age too. So hopefully this doesn't constantly become an issue. It's a tough one, but again, through education, again, and working with students and with their mental health and all the different peer pressures that happen. That's the steps to help young ladies not get in circumstances.
Thank you. We're going to transition just a little bit and talk about the legalization of marijuana. So, Joe, if we'll start with you, what is your stance on the legalization of marijuana for recreational use in Wisconsin? And how would you propose the use of tax revenue generated from legalization to address social issues, there's a lot of S's in those words, such as addiction treatment and community development?
Well, with marijuana, first of all, with the medical, I think everyone agrees, yes, that makes sense. And actually, my understanding, a vast majority of Wisconsinites also believe the recreational piece. I don't want to be new to coming to the assembly and say, oh, I'm the marijuana guy. No, thank you. That's not, I mean, it doesn't mean that it needs to be addressed, but it needs to be addressed. Is it, and we have to look at Illinois, Michigan, what others have done. What does the data show as far as, is this causing issues with people? Is this causing people, with family issues and that? If it is, then we really need to look at it. If not, then how do we, like you mentioned, what do you do with those funds? There are significant dollars there. Mm-hmm. But I don't want people to say, oh, you're making a decision on marijuana because you want money. That's not what we need to do. We need to say, okay, what does the data say? For medical, most definitely. It says for personal recreation, I believe it says, I think someone mentioned earlier, it's like alcohol. There's certain things you can't do or can do. For example, you don't go to work after drinking. Well, you don't go to work after smoking. So those things need to be, just like anything else, it's fair as far as making sure that people are accountable. So with the second part of, I think your question had to do with on recreational, we need to study what the other states are doing. And if it's working and money's available, that's a good thing. But we got to make sure indeed that we aren't setting people up to abuse.
Thank you. Amy?
And actually this past session we did work on a bill for medical cannabis to start with. I think everyone pretty much is on board that if prescription is given by a doctor, it should be able to be fulfilled here in the state. The hiccup that we ran into, for those people that don't know, when it comes to prescription drugs, using medical cannabis is not something that we can actually filter through a regular pharmacy, so we have to set up dispensaries. And the issue that we had in the bill was, should that dispensary be state-run or privately run? So again, this is working its way through the legislature right now, but that was one of the hang-ups, was the actual dispensary, because it can't just come straight through a pharmacy under other laws and regulations. As far as looking at it from a recreational standpoint, there too we are continuing to have talks with different people. As he kind of brought up already, and Joe said, from an employer standpoint, there is some concern of an employee showing up under the influence. It's not necessarily something that all employers want to have to be a part of their daily. For those of you who maybe have been a part of a small business or have to manage people, it's just an extra step in your day that maybe could be a little hard to deal with. Looking at it from a police side of things, unlike alcohol where you can just pull someone over and do a test right there on the spot, they don't have the accessibility to do that right now when it comes to the use of marijuana. So that is another reason that we are still being a little held up, and we are continuing to monitor and watch the other states and what this is doing to them economically, socially. So those are the factors that have kind of been inhibiting us as a state from moving that forward. But the medical aspect is definitely being pushed quite heavy right now at Madison.
Thank you. And this will be our last question. I want to make sure we have time for you each to give some closing comments. So we will start with you, Amy. The citizens of Wisconsin have watched both sides continue to disagree on just about every issue and refuse to collaborate or compromise. Tell us how you plan to reach across the aisle to get more accomplished and influence your party to follow suit.
So overall, I do think it's kind of sad that there is such a divide in what you see. If you actually come to Madison and look at the records, you will find most of the bills do have bipartisan support and pass. So unfortunately, that's not what the media wants you to see. And I'm happy to tell people, you know, maybe a little bit corny to say this, but if I can high five one of my Democratic colleagues in the hallway, nobody wants to talk about that. That doesn't want to make the news. But there is more camaraderie than sometimes the media gives us credit for. I personally have worked across the aisle on several bills. That's the way it is supposed to get done. And that is what I want to continue to do down there. So although the gridlock is what you hear and see most, that's not the everyday occurrence. There is friendships down there. So I guess overall, it's not always quite like you see.
Thank you. Joe?
Well, part of it, and I want to talk more in my concluding comments, but you know, the gavel in, gavel out is just not how it should be. And I'm glad to hear that you're agreeing, hey, we need to sit down and just start talking. For those that know me, it's called the we attitude, the we philosophy. I've always believed in it, and it's worked in our district, and I hope it works when I go to Madison. And that's the whole idea of sitting down with people saying, okay, you and I disagree immensely on policy. However, we both want Wisconsin to be the best it can be. If you start with that intent, which is a huge shift, because some people just say, oh, that other side. Well, no, that other side, I think they're here for the right reasons too. That is a huge shift. But once you do that, then again, you can bring in, pick the topic. Who are the experts in that area? Who are the people impacted by it? And sit down and talk to make things happen. Again, focusing on what people agree with versus of the conflict. So if I can just start into my other one, or do we
You can
flip
go
back?
for it, yes.
Okay. First of all, thank you all for coming. And I apologize for my nervousness. What was that? I tell you, that was like, whew. Anyway, what I do want to say, if you really want to ever soul search of who you are as a human being, run for office. Like, wow, I didn't realize how much, you know, my true beliefs. And that's, I gotta tell you, the we philosophy more than ever has hit me. That's how we have to make things work. And you look back, and everyone is important. How sometimes anger occurs, but you know, Tommy Thompson, he did a great job. They would argue and argue, when at the end of the they'd go have a beer. That's what we need to get back to, of working together as a team. I've knocked on over 4,000 doors. Yeah. And doing that, the number one thing that people told me, which I did not see, I thought, oh, it's going to talk about inflation, you're going to talk about border. 2 words: get along. They clearly are saying, geez, you people down in Madison, work it out. Just work it out, because if you don't, you know, guess what? Nothing happens. You know, it has to do, when I said earlier how I was brought up, prioritize. If everything's important, nothing's important. You have to be willing to say, yep, here's things that I really believe in that, boy, I'm not going to budge much on this one. These other ones you want, well, let's talk. If everybody does that, everybody wins. There is no loser. The whole point is working together to work it out. So lastly, when I get knocking on doors, I think I'm going to do it if I win or lose, just to get to know more people. It's just really a fun activity. But they talked to me and they said, Joe, you know, we know you. And then, well, thank you. And then they say, we trust you. So I hope you can trust me by going to Madison, because I will make sure I represent every one of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Amy?
Again, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you to the Chamber for having this. Overall, I have enjoyed my last 2 years. I have enjoyed the times I've worked across the aisle. I have enjoyed the different debates, the different forums I've been a part of. I enjoy sometimes the conflict that can be there, but when we can get through that and come to the floor and vote and get that across the aisle, that does mean something. And I thrive and want to see that continue to happen. I hate to say it, Joe, but I'm at over 10,000 doors, so I hear you. The doors are key. I'm a little tired some days. But you know, it's not as much necessarily the door number as that interaction with the people. And every door that opened to me, I truly loved saying to them, this is the favorite part of my job. This is what I enjoy the most, is one-on-one conversations. Don't get me wrong, I love some of the different towns meetings I go to and all the different events that I've had, but that one-on-one opportunity to talk to people is key. And I want to continue to do that in the next session. I want to continue to represent. I want to continue to listen. I know sometimes I'm locked into what people call these far views, but if you actually check my record, you're going to see some of the information you've been provided is false. And I do want to work with people in the community, again, so my family wants to raise their kids here when the time comes. So overall, again, let's work together, let's prioritize Sheboygan, and let's do what's right for our community. And I look to serve you all again for another 2 years.
Thank you. And thank you again to both of you for your willingness to serve and to be here today, to be a part of the candidate forum and give everybody an opportunity to get to know each of you a little bit more. Thank you again also to Prevea Health for their generous sponsorship and continued support of our chamber programming. And we are going to take a short break and come back with District 27 here very shortly. So thank you so much.